All right, so we are on the way to play my first ever Max Payne Monday with Dentist Dave, the man himself. He's got us some matching jerseys that say Billboard Boys, since we're on the billboard across the street from Hustler. Yeah, so we're gonna represent the brand today. Let's see how it goes. All right, so like I said, we are playing Max Payne Monday here at Hustler Casino Live. The stakes are 10, 20, 40, so it's still a decent sized game. That's a lot of money. Max buy-in is $10,000 though, so shouldn't be too much damage, but never say never. Anyway, the show is about to start back there. Time to get in the mix and see what happens. I suspect I'll play a lot of hands, so probably gonna lose or win a decent amount. See you guys on the other side. All right, everyone, here we are playing Max Payne Monday. As mentioned, the game is 10, 20, 40 with a big blind ante. I sit down with $10,000, which is the max, and in the first interesting hand, it gets to me in late position with pocket tens. I raise it up to 100. Johnny calls on the button, and then Nate Hill makes it 400 from the big blind. Not the biggest sizing, especially once Johnny makes the call on the button. So when it gets back to me, I think against such small sizing, we should be re-raising with pocket tens at least sometimes. This is going to be one of those times. I make it 1,000 to go. Not really interested in calling and then letting Johnny in behind me as well. So 1,000 to go. Back on Nate, and as you guys can see, he's got himself pocket aces, which have me in pretty bad shape. But he decides to just call, which I like considering that there's not a ton of money left behind, so he should have no problem getting all in by the river. Heads up in position to a flop of King, King 5 with a flush draw. He checks, I bet small, just like I would with most of my hands, if not all of them, on a board like this, and Nate makes the call. Turn card's interesting. It's the 5 of diamonds, double pairing the board. Nate checks again, and now we have a question between checking back or continuing to bet. And I think my hand is good enough to just try and get to showdown with at this point. Could also serve the purpose of bluff catching against his potential bluffs on the river. So I check it back, and we see the 5 of spades on the river, which is a really interesting card. Now there's a full house on the board, and it takes me a little bit to realize that I'm counterfeit. I am now playing the board, so my pocket tens don't really mean much. Not exactly sure what I'll do if Nate checks it over to me, but we'll never know because instead he announces all in himself for $3,100, essentially a pot-sized bet. Kind of strange, I'm not going to lie. I feel like he could be doing this with a fair amount of ace-high hands or perhaps pocket pairs himself that try to get me off of a chop. As you guys can see, he's got himself pocket aces, which I did not expect to see. I thought if he had something good, it would obviously just be a king. But in the end, I don't really think it's a great idea to call in hopes of just chopping the pot, since that's what would happen if he was somehow bluffing. So I end up deciding to fold, and thank goodness I did because I could have lost a lot more. This next hand is once again against Nate Hill, but I think it requires a lot less analysis. He raises it up to 120 bucks with Ace King. A couple of calls before I look down at Ace King myself in the small blind, make it $900 to go. Gets back to Nate, and after some thought, he makes it $3,000. Pretty strong hand, most likely, but when it gets back to me, well, I didn't come to Max Payne Monday to fold Ace King pre-flop. If he's got aces or kings, so be it. I am in there. I'm all in. Nate calls right away, and we're going to be chopping this one most likely until the flop comes Queen 7 deuce all clubs. So we are getting what's called free rolled. Any club will give him the nut flush, and of course, me the losing hand. Luckily, the turn is the jack of diamonds, and the river is a black card, but it's a spade. So yeah, we end up chopping despite the nerve-wracking run out. In this next hand, we are playing a $100 bomb pot, meaning every player puts in $100 and we go straight to a flop. I get Jack 8 suited and flop top pair on Jack 7 deuce. When it checks to me, even though I don't have the strongest hand, considering there's 8 other people in the pot, I feel like our hand could use some protection, and who knows, maybe we'll get value from smaller jacks once in a while. So I bet $400 right around half pot and get called by only Dentist Dave, who, as you guys can see, has flopped himself a flush draw. Turn card looks safe, it's the 5 of diamonds, but there are plenty of draws and worse hands to get value from now, such as gut shots, flush draws, pair plus flush draws, pair plus gut shots, if that's even a thing on this board. I don't think it is, but you get the idea. I continue betting, this time for $1,000. Once again, Dentist Dave makes the call, and we see a brick on the river, the king of hearts. Well, it's not a brick, he's river top pair, but in the moment, I thought this was a brick. And when he checks, I think it's a pretty straightforward check back. But I do like the idea of sometimes betting these marginal hands for value. If Dave was hanging on with, say, a hand like 7x of clubs, or perhaps he had a flush draw on the flop and then turned a pair of 5s, I do think we could perhaps get some more value from a hand like that. Maybe he'll put me on a misdraw and end up hero calling, not something that Dentist Dave has not done before. So, like I said, checking back seems more than reasonable, but I am going to go for some thin value. He's only got $3,500 left, and if I had a bluff, I would certainly be jamming all in. So I decide to do the same with this hand. Unfortunately, Dave snap calls, and that does not look like good news. Sure enough, a king is good, and we lose a $10,000 pot over to the man himself. In this next one, a few different players limp in before Pooh Daddy on my right makes it $200 to go. I'm on the button looking down at 8-6 offsuit, and for no good reason aside from the fact that I caught some weak vibes from Pooh Daddy, I decide to re-raise this one. I make it $600 trying to get heads up with him. But what ends up happening instead is Dentist Dave comes along and everyone else folds. Not exactly what I was expecting, but hey, at least we only have one opponent going to a flop. 10-10-7 rainbow is not the worst thing ever. We've got a straight draw, which, you know, when you play 8-6 offsuit is about as good as you can hope for. He checks, and I decide to continue betting, thinking it's going to be a board that he misses on quite a bit. I put in $800 right around half pot, and Dentist Dave is not done with it just yet. He makes the call. Turn card is the queen of clubs. Now he checks it over to me, and I decide to check it back. Would also do this with some strong hands once in a while to pot control, so I am by no means giving up on this pot. But, you know, just trying to act like I might if I had a good hand. River is the king of diamonds, which, again, looks like a good card to me, just like the last hand. But once again, my man has rivered himself top pair. He checks it a third time, and now I'm not going to check back with 8 high. I decide to bet half pot again, making it look like I'm going for some value with, you know, something good. What ends up happening instead is Dave check raises all in with his rivered top pair. Can't blame the guy, but of course I have 8 high, so I cannot call. Nice hand, Dave. In the next one, there is yet again a few limpers before I raise it up with Ace Jack to $300. Action folds around to DGAF in the third blind, who makes it $1,400 to go after looking down at his cards. Action gets back to me, and I know Billy is capable of having some light re-raises. So with Ace Jack offsuit, I think the play is to either fold or occasionally re-raise myself. We've got removal to aces, jacks, ace king, you know, some good hands, definitely not all, but still worthy candidate for another re-raise as a bluff, of course. So I make it $3,000 to go. This is by no means recommended, nor am I advocating that it's necessarily good, but when you're playing against the host, I think it's a good idea to give him some action. And action we get indeed as Billy announces all in. It's only $5,000 for me to call. I am going nowhere for that price. Not expecting to be in good shape whatsoever, but again, I'm here to bring the action if I can. And thank God I did, because the flop brings an ace. That's going to be good news. He does not catch a queen to catch up, and we end up winning a $16,000 pot after some questionable pre-flop decisions. Now this next one is a weird one. Ruby's opens to $300. She's got King Deuce offsuit, so it may look a little weird, but we're playing the stand-up game, meaning we are all trying to win a pot, and she needs to win one in order to avoid losing the game. So she makes it $300 to go. Dentist Dave is next to act. He makes it $900 with pocket 5s. And then Randy, who also needs to win a hand to avoid losing the game, announces all in for $4,200. Action gets back to me, and I'm most likely just going to fold almost any 2 cards, except I've got Ace King suited. That was unexpected. I call the all-in from Randy for $4,000. Ruby's gets out of the way, of course, but Dentist Dave is having none of it. He decides to go with it. Pocket fives all in for $11,000. I, of course, call right away with a premium like ace king suited. Sadly, there are two kings accounted for, one from Ruby's, one from Randy, so that's two of the outs gone. We're going to need some help. Randy's also got the jack of hearts, which I could have used. But yeah, we still got 5 cards to come in the biggest pot of the night so far, $28,050 in the middle. Board comes queen 10-6 on the flop, so we've got 2 overs and a straight draw. Not the worst thing in the world. Turn card is a brick, though, and so we're going to need some help on the river. That's not what happens. It's the 3 of hearts, and we end up losing this flip against Dentist Dave. And once again, Dave is destroying my dreams on this stream. He picks up $16,000 in this pot, and we are back down into the negatives. At this point, I add on an additional, I think it was like $4,000 or $5,000, and the night goes on. In the following fun hand of poker, Randy raises it up to $300. Pooh Daddy calls the 300, and then it's on me with 4 deuce suited. This is a non-decision, just a straightforward fold. For that reason, I decide to re-raise to $1,000. My thinking was, Randy still needs to win a hand, trying to win that stand-up game. Pooh Daddy called, so, that can't be super strong. And so why not get in the mix with 4 deuce suited? I'm also here, like I said, to gamble a little bit. I didn't get invited on this stream to be a complete nit. So I make it 1,000 with 4 deuce. Randy calls, Pooh Daddy also calls. Flop comes down, instantly rewarding my questionable judgment before the flop. It's 10-4 deuce, 2 hearts, so we flop bottom 2 pair. Interestingly enough, Randy leads out for $2,000. Pooh Daddy folds, and he's only got $2,000 left after this $2,000 bet, if that makes sense. So I just announce all in. He doesn't think too long before calling, of course, and I show my cards. He's not happy to see it. Turn card is the Jack of Hearts. River is the 8 of clubs. And we're going to win this one, $11,000 heading our way, and we are trying to push back towards Profitville. In the next one, I decide to get a little more disciplined. Instead of 4 high, we're going to play queen high. Queen 8 offsuit, I raise it up to $100. 3 or 4 people call before Billy squeezes in the third blind yet again. This time $700 to go, and I'm not going to change my plan. When DJAF raises me, I am going to just keep re-raising and hope that good things happen. So that's what I do. I make it $4,000 to go. Everyone folds, but DJAF makes the call. So we're going to go heads up with a bad hand. At least we're in position, and we flop a pair. It's Jack, 8, deuce, rainbow. Should be ahead a good amount of the time. He checks, I bet small, $1,000, and he makes the discipline lay down with his king, queen high. This next hand is more of the same. I raise it up to $100. Sia makes the call, and then Billy makes it $400 on the button. 2 players call the $400. When it gets back to me, you guys can probably guess what I'm going to do. That's right, I raise again. I make it $2,400 to go. Gets back to GGAF on the button. He makes the call, and everyone else gets out of the way. So similar to last time, we are going to go heads up to a flop. This time we're out of position, but yet again, we flop a pair. It's King 9-7 with 2 clubs. Not bad for King Jack, so I keep betting $1,500 into the middle. DJAF makes the call, and we see the 9 of spades on the turn. Usually a card that's going to be better for him than me, so I check it. Could also bluff catch with my hand, so that's nice, but he does not want to bluff. Instead, he checks it back. River is the 5 of spades. No point in betting here, I think, so I check it again. He checks it back, and given that action, it seems we'll have the best hand more often than not. Sure enough, we are going to be beating his ace-queen. Continuing to get lucky against DJAF is not a bad thing at all. A few shuffles later, we're going to be experiencing some deja vu. Long story short, we get all-in pre-flop ace-king versus ace-king yet again, and we are once again going to be getting free-rolled as the flop comes down with 3 spades, and Randy has the ace of spades. So any spade will give him the winning hand, but just like last time, turn is a 4 of clubs, river is the 8 of clubs, and we end up, I guess you can call it holding for the chop. Avoid disaster yet again, which is definitely nice when the pot is almost $24,000. Literally the next shuffle, this hand goes down where there's an $80 straddle on, DJAF limps in, Randy makes it $200, Pooh Daddy calls the $200, and I'm in the small blind with pocket 10s. Good hand to raise with, I think, so I make it $1,200 to go. And then action gets to Sia in the third blind, who makes it $3,200 to go. $2,000 additional dollars. Action's back on me now, and I think my hand's a bit too strong to fold, but I'm definitely not loving the situation already. I toss in the 2,000, and we see an 8-high flop. 8-5-3, couple of hearts out there. I check. Sia puts in a continuation bet of $2,000. I've got an overpair, going nowhere just yet. I make the call, and we see the 9 of spades on the turn. Still have an overpair, which seems good, but when I check, Sia does not slow down. She bets $5,000 this time. And I don't know, I'm not loving this situation. Even though I do have an overpair and we beat all possible bluffs, she could still have hands like jacks, queens, kings, and aces, which given the preflop action seem quite likely. Also, I have one of the worst hands I would ever have at this point. So yeah, even though it's an overpair and it's never fun to fold those, I decide to make what I think is a disciplined laydown and find out later on that she had queens, so at least that's a good feeling despite losing the pot. And that brings us to what I think is the most interesting hand of this stream. In this one, there's a race to 200 from Randy. Pooh Daddy calls, and I am once again going to be re-raising. I've got King Jack unsuited. I make it $1,000 to go. Johnny cold calls on my left. When it gets back to Randy, he calls as well, and Pooh Daddy comes along as well. So 4 of us going to a flop of 5-5-4 with 2 spades. So I've got absolutely nothing, but I think it's a board my opponents will miss often enough. And also, if they have a hand like a middling pocket pair, we can perhaps get a fold from that later on in the hand if some good cards come on the turn to river. So I decide to start bluffing now. $1,500 to go. Johnny calls on my left. Randy makes the call as well, but Pooh Daddy gets out of the way. So after getting called by 2 opponents, not exactly ideal. Turn card, however, is one of those good ones that I was hoping to bluff on. The Queen of Diamonds. Randy checks, and I don't know. I was catching a weird vibe, like perhaps Johnny was laying in the weeds with something, or maybe Randy was. So I decide to sort of wave the white flag and check it. However, Johnny does not. He announces all in for $4,800, which is around half the size of the pot or so. Now it's back on Randy, and he thinks it over for quite a long time. And at this point, I start to wonder if Randy has a hand exactly like what he's got, some sort of middling pocket pair where he's not sure what to do. And given that I think he's got some sort of pocket pair, I think it's quite likely that Johnny has some sort of draw, like a straight draw or a flush draw. I mean, him going all in on this queen is a little bit strange. I guess he could have a hand like Queen X of spades. Of course, he could also have a 5 or pocket 4s, and he's just trying to get some value, but it's pretty hard to flop trips or a boat. So after a few minutes, when Randy lets go of his pocket 8s and it's back to me, well, King High should technically be ahead of some straight draws and flush draws. Definitely not all, but that being said, we're getting a decent price to make the call. Against all the possible hands he might play this way, I don't really think King Jack is necessarily a good call, but part of the gamble is, hey, maybe he does have one of those draws and we win with King High. So I make the call. Definitely questionable. I don't deny it, but I do make the call, and luckily Johnny says he's got a draw. We run it once, and he's got a ton of outs with 7-6 of spades. As you guys can see, it's essentially a flip, 50-50. River, however, comes in my favor. It's an offsuit 5, and just like that, we are going to be taking down this $18,000 pot with King High against 7 High. Not something you see every day, but definitely not a bad way to end the stream. We end up winning around 10 or 20,000 on stream. I'm not entirely sure how much, but stay tuned for the biggest pot of the session, which happened after the stream. All right, so here we are to summarize that Max Payne Monday I played. It's actually a few days later. In fact, I just got home from a Friday stream at Hustler, which was insane. In fact, I think it was the most money that's ever been on the Hustler Casino live table at once. Like I said, we are covering this Max Payne Monday that we went over today. But there was one more interesting hand before we sign off today that happened after the stream, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning. So in this hand, the straddle is on. Someone raises, I think it was like 200. Dave calls in the big blind, and I'm in the straddle with pocket aces. So of course I raise it up. Initial raiser folds, but Dave calls again. So we go heads up in position to a flop of 7-3 deuce. He checks, I bet, he calls. Turn card is the 9 of clubs, brings in a backdoor flush draw. So 7-3 deuce, 1 club. Turn is the 9 of clubs. He checks, I bet 1,500 bucks, and now he check raises to 25,000. That's right, 25,000. Now I've played with Dave a fair amount, and usually when he does stuff like this, it's good hands or it's maybe some sort of bluff. He definitely has both in his arsenal. But the thing is, when he bluffs in this fashion, it's usually the nut flush draw. And I had aces with the ace of clubs, meaning he obviously cannot have the nut flush draw. So yeah, I thought maybe a hand like 10-8 of clubs, like an open-ended straight and flush draw. Also 8-6 of clubs qualifies. Maybe 5-4 of clubs. You know, there's a few hands that he might be getting out of line with, but for the most part, he's going to have sets and the occasional 2 pair as well when he plays his hand this way. So it's a pretty nasty spot for aces, mostly given the fact that his raise is enormous compared to the size of the pot. So I think about it for a while, actually. I do think it's a relatively difficult decision, but in the end, I just think that my hand is a little bit too strong to fold. And if he's got me beat, well, at least it's all going to Dentist Dave, one of the nicer guys that I play with. And he also got me a custom jersey, so I feel like I owe him the action. So I make the call. Turns out he's got Queen 5 of clubs, and we hold on the river. So that hand ended up making quite a big difference in my night, and I cashed out for 50,000 and change more dollars than I showed up with. So that's a pretty big win, considering that the game was 10, 20, 40 with the occasional 80. Not bad at all. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole session in a nutshell. Those were the interesting hands. And I know I mentioned last video that I have a big announcement coming up, and I feel like most of you probably already know what it is, but not everything is 100% set in stone yet. So before I even bother going into detail, I'm gonna save it until I know everything's for sure. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and until next time, good luck at the tables. Peace.